In the north of Scotland, dramatic landscapes shaped by time are steeped in Gaelic heritage. This vast area features some of the most breathtaking wilderness in Europe. Towering peaks, secluded glens, and islands scattered along its coastline, carving their stories into the rocky shores of the islands. A groundbreaking 2004 study revealed that 5 chiefs of Clan Donald, each tracing their lineage directly to Somerled, shared a common genetic marker. From these findings, scientists estimated that nearly 500,000 people alive today may descend from Somerled himself.
Somerled is a mysterious individual. He seems to explode into history in the 1150s in mainland Argyll. There's a lot of speculation as to his origins, as to his parentage. Somerled was a very notable and successful war leader. He gathered around him a war band. His followers saw him as being potentially very successful. And with his war band and with a fleet of ships, he was able to take over the Isle of Man and the Southern Hebrides. I think Somerled was remembered as a pivotal figure in Scottish history for 2 reasons. The first was because of what Somerled himself achieved, which was carving out this empire in the Irish Sea. And second, because of what he bequeathed, because Somerled was the progenitor of a number of clans, the most prominent of which, of course, were the MacDonalds. And so the MacDonald history very much looks back to Somerled as the clan's founding father.
Separated by oceans and continents, the culture of Scotland and Maori in Aotearoa share remarkable parallels. A common reverence for the land, deep ancestral traditions, and the unbreakable bonds of community. The land is more than just a place, it's a living part of one's identity. For the Scots, the glens, lochs, and rugged Highland peaks hold stories of clans and kinship. For Maori, the whenua is a sacred ancestor, tying people to their roots and sense of belonging.
So there are some beautiful parallels between the Scottish island worldview from the Gaeltacht and Te Ao Māori, right from belonging to the land and being one with the land, to communicating with the land and looking for tohu and signs of what is to come, through to relationships in that kin-centric approach. So very strong relatedness with people, relatedness with environment, and spirituality was very, very key there too. So as we have iwi and hapu and whānau with Māori, with Scottish we have clans and septs. But there's a similarity in there, and that idea of connectedness is absolutely central. So that whakapapa was well known, except when we came here we had a very big disconnect. So that a lot of that has been, I'm not going to say lost, but it's something that needs to be brought back into the open and revived so that it can be carried forth, because it really is central. As a Pākehā here in Aotearoa, I feel that we need to know and understand that whakapapa much more deeply so that we are stepping forward in a culturally safe way as tangata whenua, so that we can be supportive and stand alongside mana whenua. As tangata tiriti, I believe that it is our place to engage with our whakapapa and know who we are and where we're from, and to revitalise our cultural understanding and to learn our whakapapa that has been sort of misplaced and disconnected as we have moved from our homelands over here to Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Scottish and Maori culture share a deep connection to the land, recognising that identity, history and spirituality are carved into the natural world. This respect inspires stewardship and resilience in their Indigenous traditions. The values held by Scottish clans, including Clan Donald, closely align with the Maori principles of whakapapa, emphasising the significance of ancestral bloodlines and their connection to both community and the land itself.
Within the islands, we have a term called dukus, and du means land, so it's of the land. And that is that belongingness and connection to place, which is absolutely critical. Everything comes down to where you stand, where you connect to. You are one with the land. You do not own the land. You belong to the land. You are one with the land. And that's absolutely central in that worldview and links to everything. So we have a term called dukus, and that term is about knowing your land. What is it that you have learned? What is it teaching you? What can you utilise to be able to give back to the land? Because there's always a portion that you must give back. You must not take. It's always reciprocal. And that works in all aspects, with people, with the whenua, spiritually, on all those different levels.
Both cultures honour landscape and natural features that link the past with the divine. In Scotland, this connection is embodied by the misty glens, cairns and sacred wells. In Aotearoa, Maunga, Awa and Marae are sacred. Clans in Hapu are extended family groups tracing descent from common ancestors, each with traditional leadership structures. Scottish clans are typically led by a chief. Hapu are guided by a rangatira.
When talking about law, one of the stories that comes through, it's an ancient story and it comes through Ireland and Scotland, is that of the hazel tree as being one of the big four trees and the one that connects to the other world. So the spiritual and the earthly realms connect. And there is a fae guardian of this hazel tree, so it's important that you approach with respect. These trees carry wisdom, and the story goes along the lines of dropping the hazelnuts into the waterway and then the salmon eating those hazelnuts and gaining the wisdom, and then someone fishing those salmon up and eating them, and so that is how they obtain their wisdom. So this is the story that sits behind how people obtain that understanding and knowledge so that they can have that capacity to relate to the land and learn and understand and look for patterns and live within that space.
The hazel tree is an enduring emblem for clans, anchoring the meaning of whakapapa. Shared values, genealogy and connection to the land are infinite, reminding us that our tipuna stories are not just history, but a living legacy, guiding us in how we understand our place in the world. For 1,000 years, this legacy ruled the seas. Clan Donald, the Lord of the Isles, are bound by land, blood, and a fierce devotion to freedom. In the 12th century, a fierce and visionary warlord rose from the shadows of the Hebrides, Somerled. Born of Gaelic and Norse, united tribes and claimed dominion over the Highlands. Somerled fought with iron and sword. His fleet of Viking ships could carry the strength of over 4,000 men. Through conquest, he forged the foundations of Clan Donald, Scotland's most enduring and legendary clan. In this land, people lived among a class system. The more power you held, the higher you ranked. Kings controlled the region, and the people were their obedient subjects. But not all conformed to this way of life. There were those who fought for freedom and those who would stand and fight the tyrants of the ancient world. Somerled remains a legendary figure, embodying the rich tapestry of cultures that shaped medieval Scotland and the legacy of the Lordship of the Isles. Somerled's descendants include Clan Donald, one of the most powerful Scottish clans.
The MacDonald Lords of the Isles were definitely an incredibly prominent and dynamic force in not just the Highlands, but in Scottish history in general. Their influence on the course of Scottish history is hard to exaggerate. They played an enormously leading part in how the country ultimately was shaped, how the kingdom developed and how it ended up being formed. Donald was the grandson of Somerled, the name of the clan, which of course, as we know, became the biggest clan in Scotland both then and I think also now. When talking about clans, you have to understand what a clan is. It's fair to say that the members of a clan are often related to each other in some sort of way of blood ties, but that isn't necessarily always the case. What perhaps is not generally understood is that you could become the member of a clan and take that clan's name simply by association, simply because you wanted the protection of that particular clan. So there would be plenty of people who would call themselves MacDonalds who had not any blood ties to a MacDonald line. So a clan in that respect was very much a kind of society, a group of people who came together for mutual protection and benefit.
The Lord of the Isles ruled the land and seas for centuries. They thrived as a maritime kingdom, commanding power beyond the reach of Scotland's kings. But in the 15th century, their independence provoked royal opposition. The forfeiture of the Lordship of the Isles in 1493 marked their decline. Torn by feuds and rivalries, their lands fell to rival clans who aligned with the crown. This betrayal was etched in blood during the Massacre of Glencoe in 1692, a harrowing act of treachery that deepened clan divisions and Highland resentment. The Massacre of Glencoe is one of the most infamous events in Scottish history. Remembered for its betrayal and brutality, it was a tragic episode in the political and clan struggles of the late 17th century, leaving a lasting legacy of sorrow and bitterness in the Highlands. By the 18th century, their future was in doubt. Their loyalty to the Jacobite cause would lead them into the storm of rebellion, known as the Jacobite Rising, and the devastating Battle of Culloden.
Well, yes, I mean, Glencoe's prominent, isn't it, in terms of Scottish tragedies, where this particular group of MacDonalds, the MacDonalds based in Glencoe, were, this was at a time when it was in the reign of William III, William of Orange. The Highland chiefs were required to take an oath of allegiance to this particular troop of government troops who, as fate would have it, were largely Campbells, went to Glencoe about the time that its chief was required to go to Fort William to take this oath of allegiance. And because of bad weather and because of the difficult terrain, he was a bit late in getting there by 2 or 3 days. And because he was late in meeting the deadline, the order was relayed to these government troops who were billeted in the village of Glencoe, where they were being very well looked after by the Glencoe MacDonalds. Because the chief had not made the deadline, all of the MacDonalds had to be put to death. And so, in spite of the fact that MacDonalds had given amazing hospitality to these government troops, during the night in question, the government troops broke into their various houses and put a great number of the clan in the village to the sword.
38 MacDonalds were killed in their homes. Many others, including women and children, fleeing into the snow, died in the freezing conditions. News of the massacre and the betrayal of hospitality, a sacred Highland custom, caused outrage in Scotland and beyond.
Scotland, bitter sense of betrayal led to the rebellion, and that rebellion mostly came from the Highlands. So Scotland is very sharply divided into lowlands and highlands. The lowlands were already, by the middle of the 18th century, becoming very prosperous, having quite a lot of influence in England, creating a different kind of ethos with particularly individual title to properties. So great lords with strong land holdings controlled the lowlands, not so the highlands. Yes, the Jacobite word comes from the Latin for James. And so the Jacobites are the followers of James II, King of Great Britain, from 1680 to 1688, according to one reckoning, when he fled the throne, when he was pressured by his daughter and son-in-law to go away, and he fled to France. So Jacobites are the people who remained faithful to James and believed he still was the rightful king of Great Britain.
The Jacobite cause was a movement rooted in loyalty, faith, and a contested crown. For the next century, the cause became a rallying cry for those who sought to restore the House of Stuart to the thrones of England, Scotland, and Ireland. For many, it represented the struggle of Catholicism against the Protestant establishment. For others, it was about resisting centralised authority and preserving traditional clan structures and Highland ways of life.
It was a great prize to be King of England and separately King of Scotland, because until 1707, the thrones were separate thrones. But in 1707, they'd been combined into a single United Kingdom, and the Scottish Assembly had been dissolved. So from then on, the Scots were simply allowed a small number of electorate seats in the House of Parliament at Westminster, and some of their lords, but by no means all, were allowed to be in the House of Peers. But in 1745 came the Great Rebellion, and the 45 has gone down in history as a critical moment in Scottish history, because in the 45, the son, the young pretender, actually arrived in Scotland and looked for the forces of Scotland who would rally to the cause and would throw the Georges off the throne. Charles Edward Stuart, eldest son of pretender James, who's living in Rome and is not in the least interested in English affairs, Charles Edward Stuart agrees to be the figurehead for the rebellion. Charles Edward Stuart is not at all happy about this, but back they go. With tensions in their midst, they go up the north-east rather than they came down the northwest and returned to Scotland. And by this stage, the English are devising a plan. And their plan involves the military leader who was the youngest son of George II, the Duke of Cumberland, William, Duke of Cumberland. So William sets to work and plans a strategic move. And he was a meticulous planner. He was actually a very good general, I think. And so he will not rush in, because there's been far too much rushing about that's allowed this, catastrophe to happen. So he carefully takes several months to make sure his troops are well secured in their territory, retakes Edinburgh, and eventually the location is chosen, and they set up a position where they will attack the rebel troops on the fields of Culloden. They are wiped out, and then for the next 2 days, On instructions from the Duke of Cumberland, they set out to slaughter any Highlander that they can find who was involved in this battle, many of whom are trying to flee home. And there ensues, really shocking massacre on the fields of Culloden, which has gone down in English history as one of the most shocking stories in the way you treat your fellow countrymen.
In the aftermath of the failed Jacobite rising and the devastating Battle of Culloden, the way of life for Scottish clans was shattered. English forces swept through Scotland, burning homes, seizing lands, and forcing families to flee. Clan Donald and countless others were left to face the grim reality of cultural erasure.